Have you ever asked yourself, who are the best authors out there writing for children today? Well, I've got one of them with me in the studio today, and her name is Jacqueline Woodson. She is the very talented and fabulous author of award-winning picture books, juvenile fiction, and young adult fiction, and we're going to have the pleasure of sitting down to meet her and talk with her. That's coming up next on Books Alive. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Books Alive. I am so proud to tell you that I am joined in the studio today by the one and only Jacqueline Woodson. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You can see this is bringing tears to my eyes. And it is, because when we started doing this show about 4 years ago, I have top 5 for my books. You're in it as an author and also with your work. So to sit down with you today and to be able to share you with our audience is such a privilege and such a pleasure.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to have you here with us. Okay, having said all of that, why do I feel this way? Okay, let's talk about, if you haven't, for some reason, picked up her picture books or her fabulous middle grade fiction or her young adult, let me give you a sense of what we have here. Okay, you've won 2 Newbery Honors? 3? Okay, you've got how many Coretta Scott Kings?
4.
4, okay, all right. National Book Award finalist? 2. Okay, and the state awards?
1.
Caldecott 1. The state awards go on and on and on. I mean, the lists are just phenomenal. So it's a testimony.
Don't forget Margaret A. Edwards.
Margaret A. Edwards, yes. I mean, she is way up there. This woman is at the top. Okay, so let's figure out what you've got here and what makes it so fabulous. You talk about, somebody asked you about whether these are autobiographical. And you said they're emotionally autobiographical. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think one of the first rules of writing you learn is write what you know. And so I don't always know the physical situations of my characters, but I definitely have experienced emotionally every emotion I put into my characters. And because I write realistic fiction, it tends to be emotional. So the whole gamut of emotions, sadness, fear, happiness, surprise, everything is in my characters, and is something that I know deeply because I'm living.
Well, and you are a better witness than I think most of us are, and you are more aware, and you can clarify it, as Jay Jones, I think, might say.
That's funny.
Better than most of us can. Because when we read them, we see ourselves so clearly in the books.
Well, I think, and I know you know, as a media specialist, that's what literature does, that's what literature that is working does. It invites the reader in and to basically hold up a mirror and see where they can find themselves in a book where the characters are completely foreign to them. Some kid who is coming at a book about people of color and has never even met one can look into the pages and see himself the way I grew up having to find myself in books where people of color were absent. So, but I don't endeavor to do it. I don't say this is what I need to do. I need to connect with my reader, because when I'm writing, I'm not thinking about the reader. I'm just thinking about the story and the characters in it. But I want to connect with my characters, and I think by doing the extension of doing that is eventually the reader connects.
Well, you are a master. Absolute master. I'm going to start with one of my absolute favorite books in all of children's literature, and that is called The Other Side. Jacqueline Woodson and illustrations by E.B. Lewis. Go ahead.
Go ahead with which part?
How about, well, why did you write this?
I actually wrote The Other Side. When I wrote The Other Side, I wanted to write about the ways in which segregation still exists in our country. And so when I had written it, I had this perception of it as being a modern day story about segregation. So it begins that summer, the fence that stretched through our town seemed bigger. We lived in a yellow house on one side of it, and white people lived in the other. On the other, Mama said, "Don't climb over that fence when you play." She said it wasn't safe. So I wrote those words and finished the book, and then I get to choose my illustrator. So I chose E.B., and when you choose an illustrator, you're not allowed to talk to them. So he set the book back in the past, and I was really cranky about that for a while. But the illustrations were so beautiful that I quickly forgave him.
Yes.
And he does some really interesting stuff with the illustrations and with the setup of the book.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I can see why you forgave him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty magical.
And it actually is, I think what he did was important. I think it's hard for people to talk about how much work our society still has to do. And I think it's easier for people to look at it as something that happened in the past. And I think E.B. intuitively knew that when he started drawing the pictures. And as a result of it, the book, I think, got out into the world much more than it would have if it had been a book told about present-day segregation. And what it allows me to do is when I go into schools and libraries, I can talk about my intention.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is a book about two little girls, and both their mothers have told them, don't go on the other side of the fence because it's not safe.
Mm-hmm. And it's a book about girls who are activists and who change the world. And I think it's important for young people to know that they have the power to change the world. Even though this seems like a small way, it's actually quite large.
Oh, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. And they teach the others around them, which is really amazing. Mm-hmm. So this is just absolutely a diamond. It just shines. So you like to maybe challenge your readers to change the world, or just offer them an opportunity?
I like to challenge myself. So, and I think every time I write, I've learned something new about myself and what my work is in the world. And I think, again, because of that, the reader does. And I think because I think children are amazing, and I think they do have the power to change the world, I want to write literature that shows them that they do have, that reinforces that power.
Mm-hmm. Shows them that they have it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I'm going to pick up something completely the opposite. We had a picnic this Sunday past. This is so fun. It is so fun. Because her whole family, I'm gathering it's your family.
It's, I grew up with my mom and my grandma, but it's actually the family that I was always looking at across the park.
Oh.
So, I think there are definitely elements of my grandmother in there.
Uh-huh.
And present-day friends who can't cook so well, like Cousin Martha. It's the story of a girl and her family who go on a picnic, and there's Cousin Martha who always brings the really dried-out apple pie, and no one has the heart to tell her not to bring it.
Yes.
And it's about family, the way families gossip among themselves, and all the characters that come to the picnic. But I always felt myself, when I went to Prospect Park as a kid, which is a park in Brooklyn where I live, looking across at other families thinking, wow, they're having a really great time.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, wow. I love how some of the men show up empty-handed.
The men and the
Is
boys.
Is that symbolic?
That's funny.
But, I thought of it as everybody coming to the picnic and bringing, something to contribute, not just food, but of their self, from themselves. And that was just really fun. And then when she doesn't come with the pie, that was pretty fun.
It's true. And then also, the interesting thing for me is, the guys do, some of them show up empty-handed, but they do, as you say, bring representations of themselves, like the cousin who picks daisies as he comes and tries to charm the ladies and ends up, and the cousin who brings the smile for the camera. He's like ready to pose and be in all the pictures. Yeah. And the Reverend bringing the Bible and his appetite. So. And
they're pieces of the puzzle. They just make it whole. That's really great. Now, thinking of roots, because you and I were just having a rather interesting discussion about roots. Coming on home soon. You set in World War II, and this is something I didn't know about. The cleaning of the trains. So this little girl's mom has that opportunity. I mean, that's how they see it.
Yes. I think during what made me write Coming on Home Soon, I would read all these Rosie the Riveter stories, and black women were absent from them. And I thought, we must have been doing something. And so I started researching, and what happened was, the men went away to war, and the women started taking the men's jobs, and the black women were given the jobs that, of course, other people didn't want, but were big opportunities for them. And so her mother gets a job cleaning the railroad, cleaning the train cars, and has to go up north to do so because they live in a really rural area. So it was, for me, about trying to learn something, and I did do all this research and find out this stuff, and then want to write about what it means to have a mom who goes away and who's doing something groundbreaking. I mean, I think for me that book was about putting black women in World War II on the page of history and literature, and showing that we were there too, which I feel like we have to say again and again, because I think African American history can get erased in this country if we're not keeping the records.
I think a lot of people's history gets erased in this country. This is also E.B. Lewis, and this is the grandmother and the lady's daughter, and now she's gone. She has left. But the kitten comes. And I love how the grandmother just won't open herself up to that cat. It's like hope or something. And she's just like, no way. So the whole light of it, the whole spirit of it, but the hopefulness that the girl has throughout is just wonderful.
Yeah. And I think E.B. does a good job of representing the hope with the light, with the way he paints in light and shadows. And because he had done the other side first, I knew he was good at doing stuff set in the past.
And he would know.
Yeah.
He would know what to do. Oh, when you turn the page to the end, which I am not going to do, because you're going to have to check this book out, it took my breath away. It was so beautiful. Now, let's go to the real history maker over here, or the other powerhouse, and that is Showay. Now, what prompted this?
Showay is the story of my family, from my great-great-great-grandma to my daughter Toshi, Georgiana. And my family, once they realized I wanted to be a writer and was serious about it, they kind of shut up and stopped talking. But then around me, because I think they thought I was going to put the stories out into the world. But when my grandmother was, once she got older and she knew she was moving on to the next place, I think she started giving me all of this family history. And she always asked when I was going to give her some great-grandbabies, and I kept saying soon, soon.
Yes.
And she died 4 months before I got pregnant with my daughter, Toshi. So I knew I wanted to I wanted to figure out a way to connect them and pay tribute to the long line of women who came before me and came before my daughter, because I think nothing happens in a vacuum. And so I started going back over the pages of our family history and began to write that story.
Oh, look at this. I mean, it's generation after generation of women and how they're connected, and there's just this incredibly gorgeous, female out there, and all the others are just about to come and to connect one after the other. And the whole thing is done like the quilt that would have shown the way in the Underground Railroad.
Exactly.
So it's just amazing. It's a very powerful book. Very powerful book. So history, and particularly showing the African American woman's history, well, in both of them really, the continuity from generation to generation, the issue of segregation, the wonder of family connectedness, the strength that you get from that, I mean, a lot of issues. Is that Sweet Memory? Yeah. So that would be your granddad, and trying to figure out how to cope with that.
Yeah, my grandfather was a big gardener, and I think that's one of my first pretty autobiographical stories, which was the story of him dying when I was 7, and us taking over his garden. But of course, because when I was a kid, I wanted to be an only child, I decided to make the main character an only child, but there were 4 of us.
Why did you want to be an only child?
Oh, I think it's every child who comes from a big family's dream, just like I'm sure every only child dreams of having lots of siblings.
Now, we have not yet set foot into the fabulous territory of the juvenile fiction and young adult. And I think we're going to need to do that because it's incredible treasure over there. But first, let's take a little break.
Okay.
You and I can kick back, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at some of those incredible books that have won so many awards and touched so many hearts. Stay with us.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
Everyone has friends. There's online friends, friends to go out with on a Saturday night, friends to hang out with and do nothing, friends who show up on moving day. And then there are the friends who'll be there if someone is dealing with a mental illness. Are you one of those friends?
And welcome back. If you're just joining us, I am in the studio today with the remarkable Jacqueline Woodson, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
It's really a pleasure and a privilege. We're going to take a look at some of her juvenile fiction and her young adult books, and she writes like nobody else when you're wandering into this neck of the woods. I'm going to start with Last Summer with Mason. She just told me how to pronounce that. And these little girls live in the city. Is there a magic thing about 12 for you, or 11?
You know, I think it was Madeline, I know it was Madeline Lingle, who said when you write remembering the child you were, as opposed to writing for your grandkids or trying to imagine their lives. And I think the years that stay with me the most are the years between 11 and 16. And so that's a lot of where I write from.
Okay.
And of course, the picture books, age 7 is a big marker for me.
And
so when I'm ready, when I have a character in my head, I can go to that place and remember what it was like to be that age.
You really can. You sure can. Okay, Margaret and Mason are like friends to the core. To the core. They get each other like nobody else does. But at the beginning of this one, things are not good for Margaret. Do you want to tell people what this is about?
Yeah, I mean, I like what you said about it. It's the story of their friendship, and at the beginning, Margaret's father dies. And also at the beginning, Mason gets a letter that she's been accepted to a boarding school in Connecticut and is going to be leaving soon. So it's about that summer, their last summer as friends, and as friends living on the same block, and what becomes of them.
And there's Margaret trying to deal with the loss of her father, but now she has to deal with the loss of her best friend. And yet I thought it was so interesting that when Mason goes away and there's that vacuum for Margaret, things start coming into that vacuum. And she starts really seeing herself more clearly, I think, than she ever did when she had Mason there to sort of look at.
Exactly. I think it is a novel about coming of age, and she does begin to see figure out who she is in that absence.
You've got a line in here where I think, no, that was Nika and Dee, where the one says, if I looked for something for 99 years, I could never see as much as the other does. And I think of Margaret that way with Mason, because Mason knows the dances. She just seems to know everything, and she's so smart.
Yeah.
And there's Margaret kind of in the shadow. Yeah, but she's about to emerge in a big way, because she finds out she has a gift. Now, is this autobiographical?
You know, in the way they all are.
Okay.
I think it's emotionally autobiographical. I knew people who went to boarding schools. You know, I have people in my family who've gone to boarding school. I didn't go to boarding school. And I definitely knew neighborhoods like that. I would say in terms of the neighborhood, that was my childhood neighborhood. And it was my first novel, and I think with your first novel, a lot of that stuff gets put in there.
Now, you have a fascinating character named Miss Dell, and she has a gift. And why did the spice of that gift, what is that all about?
Miss Dell is clairvoyant, and of course I always wanted to be clairvoyant. So the great thing about writing is you can just build your own kingdoms, and so I can give the characters the stuff that I would like for myself. And also I think it's representative of the old ladies on the block who watch you. They seem to have eyes in the back of their head. They seem to know so much, and you're like, how could you possibly know that? It happened 3 blocks away, and I thought no one who knew me was around. So that becomes kind of that magnified sense of it, which is clairvoyance.
And you have a line where the 2 ladies are saying, and I think it's when Mason is going to come back, and it's like, there's the one who raised her, and the one who raised her eyebrows at her. That's pretty cool. I mean, that just nails it. That just says it just so perfectly. That's so great. Now, Mason comes home, and it's a little bit, you're kind of looking at, all right, who grew? One went away to grow, the other stayed to grow. And they both grew, but, in different directions. Now, this is a trilogy.
Yes.
And I have book 2 of it, which is Between Madison and Palmetto.
That's actually book 3.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So Mason...
Mason at Blue Hill is book 2, and that's Mason's story while she's at the boarding school.
Oh.
And then Between Madison and Palmetto is the final in the trilogy when they're together again.
Okay. And Mason has a very difficult time at Blue Hill. Because she's thrown into a world of white girls with a few African American girls.
Yeah, it wasn't many people of color there, and she had been raised in a neighborhood where that was predominantly people of color, and so she ended up in a world that was not familiar to her at all, and couldn't thrive, which I think happens to a lot of people, unfortunately. And so that question of, do you go or do you stay? And is leaving a failure? And I don't think she failed. I think she figured out what she needed for herself and went after it, which was her own metamorphosis.
Beautiful. Now, she seeks someone who gets her as well as Margaret gets her when she's up at Blue Hill. And I think everyone seeks that person. You want somebody who truly sees you and senses you. And I know in some of your other books, people find that. And If You Come Softly, let me grab that here. Here it is. I mean, these 2 just meet by chance in the middle of a school.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah. If You Come Softly, I wanted to see if I could write a retelling of Romeo and Juliet. And set it in present day, and so it becomes the story of Jeremiah, who's from a wealthy African-American family, and Ellie, who's from a pretty well-off white Jewish family, and they meet at a private school in Manhattan, on Manhattan's East Side, and fall in love. And it's about the struggles of their relationship and what's happening in the city and the tragedy of it all.
Now, Ellie, who's the girl, has an older sister who gets her like unreal. Like she just calls her on the phone and she instantly consents where she is. And yet, when she tells her, I've met this guy and he's African American. Even though it's Anne, the sister, has chosen an alternative lifestyle, she's not open to what Ellie's telling her.
Yeah.
That's pretty complex.
It is. I think humans are complicated.
Yeah.
And I think there is that that thought that if someone has some kind of other discrimination against them, that they will get all kinds of discrimination, or that they won't discriminate, and it's not true. So, and that character, her big sister, proves that to her.
That's a lot of wisdom. That's a lot of wisdom. Now, Ellie's mother, Marion, had come and gone. How nice is that? When you just don't want to be the mom anymore, you go on off on your own. And she's not the only mom in your books to take that little trip.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I think it's a hard character to write, especially as a mom myself. And at the same time, I get it. I mean, you know, as a mother, sometimes you're like, I want to go away. You know, I want to leave. I change my mind. But you don't. And I think, and some people do. And I think some people do it, and it's a good thing because it protects the children. You know, I can stay here and damage these children and be unhappy and my kids be unsafe, or I can go away and give them a better chance. And so Marion, I don't know what her choices were around that, but I do, as a writer, have to look at both sides of everything and try to eventually understand the complexity of the character in order to make them real on the page.
Yeah, your characters are magnificently complex. Now, I'm not going to give away the ending of this one, which is one of my absolute favorite books in the entire library, and it requires a tissue box. I will tell you that. But she wrote a sequel to it after 9/11, and that book is called Behind You. Do you want to talk about how that worked for you?
Yeah, I had never intended to write a sequel to If You Come Softly, because there's no sequel to Romeo and Juliet. And then when I lost friends in 9/11, and I started thinking about what happens when you lose someone suddenly. What do you do with that? How do you have a catharsis around it? How do you keep going forward? And the characters from If You Come Softly came back to me, and I decided I wanted to write from the point of view of that after. So one of the main characters is dead and writing and speaking from that point of view, and the ones who have survived are also telling their story. So it's written in vignettes, and basically it's that story of how we move forward. And also, in the end, I say, you know, and in your life you'll realize what those who leave us leave behind, this chance at remembering and this chance of a whole other life. And so yet you have the life before the person dies, and you have the life after the person dies, and you might not have had that life. So it is, in some ways, a way of looking at it positively. So it was a hard book to write.
I'll bet. A lot of your characters have loss, just like Margaret losing her father and Mason having her father return. That's a huge change. But you really took the rug out from under these people in Hush, where the father has a really tough choice to make, Officer Dennis. And go ahead, Jacqueline.
He becomes part of the Witness Protection Program, and as a result, his daughters Tuswy and Cameron have to completely change their identity and leave the place they've always known and start again as different people.
And who are you when you leave your friends, everybody who knows you, your house,
your name?
I mean, strip that identity right away. What is left? What is left when that happens to you? What'd you leave them with?
They find out.
Yeah, it was very cool to watch them descend and then spiral back up. And the dad having the difficult struggle.
Wondering if he made the right choice or not. I think he did. So.
I agree with you. And the mom turning to religion. That was pretty powerful. It was a bridge for her.
I think it is for a lot of people. I think sometimes it's all they have, which, you know, of course, segues into feathers.
Yes.
And thinking about how
Let's
people
grab it.
survive.
All right. So he walks into that classroom, and he's completely different. He is completely different, and he's nobody they've ever known before. And the one little girl actually thinks he might be Jesus. That's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah. It's you know, Feathers was originally called The Jesus Boy, and when I was first starting to write it, it was the story of the Jesus Boy, of him walking into that classroom. It was told from his point of view what it was like to walk into an all-black classroom in 1971 and have everyone assume you're white and other things about you. And as I rewrote and rewrote and rewrote, I realized that it was a story about hope and the way people try to find hope. And so yellow, the feather is yellow because yellow is the color of hope, supposedly. And it is about a group of kids, and they're all trying to figure out who they are, and each has a different thing in their life that they're hopeful for, and are trying to figure out.
Like every kid in every classroom. I mean, and some adults as well. Now, you were talking about kids trying to figure out who they are and have hope, which leads me directly to our very good friend, Lonnie C. Motion, otherwise known as Locomotion. And he's got quite a burden.
He does. He has the burden of poetry. Yeah, he's
Spoken as poet.
He's learning to tell a story through poetry, and it is a story that's complicated and sometimes tragic, and eventually the thing that is going to keep him moving forward. So he's been separated from his sister. He's in the foster care system, and he's in 5th grade, and he gets a great teacher that introduces him to poetry and to his story, which he begins to write.
You know, it was interesting to me that at the beginning he has, her name just went out of my head.
Miss Marcus, Miss Edna.
Miss Edna. Her voice, and he has to hurry up and get the idea down before her voice can snuff the candle out. And she is the foster mom. And, you know, she's a complex character too, because all of a sudden she's like telling him, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. And then she's like, why aren't you saying anything? Well, you've snuffed it out. And that was pretty powerful. But his parents have died in a fire, and he and his sister are left, and they're separated. And how do you process all of that? December comes around, and he doesn't want to have December on the calendar anymore.
December 9th. Yeah, it's funny. You know, it's actually going to be a play at the Kennedy Center that I just finished writing.
Oh, congratulations!
So, thank you. And so I've just spent the summer with the characters all over again. So and thinking about it in a whole different way, the play as opposed to the novel. But I had to think about the novel because it's written in poems. The novel is a collection of poems that arc into the story. And I think the fact of his parents in the fire, in the book, it's kind of him getting to that story. So you don't get it until somewhere late in the book you find out how his parents died, but he's carrying the death of them for a long time until poetry kind of allows him to move through it.
And there's a sequel, which is Peace, Locomotion. And they're still not together. But he's entered into a new zone where he's talking about the before time. Because when he's 21, he's going to get Lily and be with her. So he's keeping the memories recorded.
And he also, again, gains the brother who comes home from the war and another brother who comes home. So 2 foster brothers who come home and actually help him out a lot. And he helps them out a lot, it turns out. But he is keeping a collection of letters for his sister, and they're still very connected.
There's a line in here where Jenkins, who is the older brother who's come home from the war and he's lost a leg, and he says to his mother, this is not the dream that I had. And she says to him, but this is what we have and we're going to be living it. And Locomotion decides, tomorrow when I see Lily, I'm going to ask her a lot of questions to make sure she's living it. And, you know, you wonder how many people are living it. Are they taking every day and really living it? And I'm going to grab Tupac here. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay. And Tupac, this is really cool. After Tupac and Dee Foster, and where I was going with that was, let me think, what was I saying?
You're talking about living the dream?
Yes, and how they go for the big purpose. Yes.
Yeah, and trying to figure out what their big purpose is. It's a story of 3 girls who are friends, and part of the reason they come together is around Tupac Shakur, who died, who was an amazing rapper and I think activist, who's Baltimore's own. You know, he's right out of here. But Dee Foster comes into their lives, and she's a foster child, and kind of awakens them to how kind of privileged and sheltered they are, and what the great big world is like off their block, out of their neighborhood, which they don't get to venture out into often at all.
Until she decides to take them somewhere. Well, they realize how much love is on the stairs out front. And Nika, who is one of the 3, and one of them is never named, it's just me.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. It's funny because when I was writing it, I never outlined. I never know where a story's going. I never know how I was going to get there. I just started writing. And I kept trying to figure out what her name is and what her name was. And I realized halfway through the book that there's a reason she doesn't have a name, just like what we find out about Dee Foster. There's something about a sense of intimacy that you can miss. You think you're more intimate with something or someone than you are. So here's this person telling you this really passionate and intimate story, and you think you guys are really close, and you close the book and you don't remember her name. And you know, the same with Dee Foster when they have that revelation and they realize what they realize about her.
I think Nika is going to resonate with a lot of people because of how she wants so much. She gets on that bus and she wants people to see her as somebody. She wants to be respected. You know, she wants to be a lawyer someday. She wants to make a mark, be seen. I think people feel that way. And that was so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like her a lot.
And then you brought in a couple other elements here because you've got Tash. Okay. And Tash is her older brother, well, one of them, and he has ended up in jail, and he's also gay. And so you're telling his story.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Tash too. Yeah, you know, I wanted to go inside. I wanted to explore that. What does it mean to be gay in prison and innocent? I mean, he was innocent, and then what does it mean for the family? What does it mean for Tash? And what does his gayness mean for the family, including the older brother who loves him and the family adores him, and he adores the family, and the 2 younger brothers. There's that one scene where they go into the prison, and also how dehumanizing the prison system can be. So there's the one scene where they go into the prison, and the Albert, they make one of the twin brothers take off his glasses and put him through like he's sneaking something in his glasses, and you know, he can't see for that moment until he gets them back. And it's just this, for me, it was a heartbreaking moment to write, because here's this little boy who just wants to go see his brother, and they're treating them like they're not even human.
Right. Well, you've got more books on the table here that are dealing with young 14-year-old girl who is trying to establish her own sexuality. And we've got Lena and the What I Hadn't Meant to Tell You book over here, where young girls are being sexually abused at home. And you've taken on such incredibly powerful issues with such insight, such clarity, such sensitivity, and you just absolutely write so wonderfully.
Thank you.
Your books are a gift to us all. And I really, really want to thank you for being here today. This has just been a real treat. So you all get a sense of the excellence that I'm talking about. Her heart is huge. Her ability to see us for who we really are and to reveal it really and recognize it for us is just truly amazing. She's like a genius. So it's just been a real treat to have her here. And all of her books are going to be on my website at bookandhug.com. So if you guys can't remember the name of one, you can go there and look up Jacqueline Woodson.
Yeah, they're
and
on my
as
website.
always, have you got a website?
It's JacquelineWoodson.com.
JacquelineWoodson.com. They're definitely there. And great information there as well. And as always, you know we want you to come and see us at the library. Thanks so much for being with us. And thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
I know.